Okay. Okay, so some of this you probably already know. Some of it you may have known once and forgotten. Some may be new ideas. All the things I say, I don't mean to imply that I'm the only one who knows them. I'm just trying to be thorough here. I'm trying to get all of this said in a certain amount of time, so I don't have time to stop and check at every step if you already know it. I'm just going to go from beginning to end. The three subjects I want to talk about today are the nature of truth, the difference between fighting and talking, and finally, logic. Starting right out with the nature of truth, I learned this from a professor when I took, I believe it was Intro to Social Work, my senior year of college, and it stuck with me. I memorized this. And every class I've ever taught since then, pretty much any time I got a whiteboard in front of me, I tried to give this same presentation the way he gave it, because I liked it so much. So what he said is, this is the truth. The truth is huge. It's gigantic. This is us. We are tiny compared to the truth. It's so big, we can't possibly see all of it. We see something, we see a piece of the truth, and this is our perspective. So, our own experience in life is too small to ever see the truth, and this is true of everyone. No matter who you are, you can never know the entire truth. You can never see the entire picture. But, don't despair. Because the interesting thing is, these are other people. Okay? And other people have other perspectives. So these people also look at the truth, and it's the same truth. It's the same world. It's the same reality. But what they see is a little different than what you see, because where they are is a little different than where we are. But it's all true. Just because what they see and know is different than what we see and know, that doesn't mean we are right and they are wrong. And it does not mean they are right and we are wrong. It's just the truth is so big, they see a different part of it. But this is what my professor taught me. If we talk to this other person, we can get a better understanding of the bigger picture. We can move beyond our own small perspective, and ultimately every life is small compared to the enormity of the world. No one life can ever see it all. But we can move beyond the limits of our one lifetime and gain more understanding of the larger truth by talking to other people. Notice, for example, over here, we have someone who, when they look at the truth, their perspective is very different. They actually see the opposite of what we see. What they see is totally different than our perspective. It seems we have nothing in common with them, it seems. It seems like they're just crazy. But they're actually looking at the same truth. And they even have maybe other people over here who they're connected with, who again, they really don't seem to have anything in common with us. But if we continue talking to other people, eventually, from what we learn from people who are only a little different than us, we can work our way across to finally bridge that gap and even understand these people over here too. It's just a matter of, I'm not getting marked around my suit here. It's just a matter of talking to enough people and listening to enough perspectives. You start with the people who are a little different than you, but keep branching out. And the more you listen, the more you talk, the more you can know. This is one of the, if not the foundation principle of my life and my philosophy. I have traveled all over the world, and I have listened to people in all walks of life. It was my whole purpose for almost an entire year. I just listened to interesting perspectives and wrote them down. The thing about this philosophy, and it is a philosophy, I'm putting this forward as an axiom. This is a philosophical belief, because there are other interpretations of the nature of truth. Some people will just say what's called objectivism. They say, well, what I believe in my mind is true for me. What that person believes in their mind is true for them. Everyone sees something different, and they're not any better or worse. But I categorically reject that. You can't just simply say my fantasies are real. You know, if I say that, you know, it's nighttime and it's daytime, you know, that's not true. You know, there is something solid here. The truth is a solid thing. It's a real thing. Maybe we can't know all of it ourselves. Our perspective is very important, and other people's perspectives are important, but that doesn't mean that you can just make things up. There is something there, and that's very important when it comes to talking to people and learning. Okay, so that's my section on the nature of the truth. That's about 6.5 minutes. Okay, good. All right, so questions to check for understandings. Is it possible for one person or one group in isolation to know the entire nature of the truth?
No.
Why not?
Truth is too large.
Good. Why does listening to other perspectives help us understand the larger truth?
Different perspectives see the truth from a different point and allow you to understand it from your point of view.
Good. Are people who have different perspectives always wrong?
No.
Are they always right?
No.
Good. Okay, so we've established that in order to find the truth, people should talk to each other. But how should they go about talking? So that brings me to my next section, which is the difference between a fighting mentality and a talking mentality. This, I took a lot of classes in college, which I only lately realized not everyone took as a political science major. Things like Introduction to Formal Logic, Introduction to Philosophy, Introduction to Political Science, Introduction to Social Work. And these classes gave me a framework to examine different ideas and discuss them. They taught me techniques for critical thinking and discussing issues in a productive manner, even with people I disagreed with. This is an important skill set, and I only recently realized not everyone had it. So I'm going to try and condense those skill sets down right now and pass that knowledge on to you. So, based on several different sources, most people kind of tend to agree. Maybe that's too much. All right, I'll just call this mine. Based on everything I learned, this is the conclusion I came up with. There's a couple of different ways to approach discussing ideas, especially with people whom you disagree with. You can have talking, and you can have fighting. It's a mentality. It's what you came here to accomplish, what you're looking at. So, the difference between a talking mentality and a fighting mentality. In a fighting mentality, we see new ideas as threats. Okay? New ideas can be very frightening to someone who has a fighting mentality. And ideas that they are not familiar with are things that either need to be attacked or perhaps things that we need to be protected from, things that need to be banned. These are scary new ideas. We can't have, they're too dangerous ideas. If you believe that ideas like that can be viewed like that, that is a fighting mentality. On the other hand, in a talking mentality, new ideas are a chance to learn. When you're confronted with an idea you've never heard of before, it's an interesting chance to perhaps learn something. Now, that doesn't mean the new idea is necessarily right. You could listen to it and determine it's full of shit. But it's not a threat to you. It's not a danger. You have nothing to lose by listening. Now, next, very important. In fighting, the goal is to win, whatever that means. People tend, in a fighting mentality, approach discussing things that they disagree with the purpose of winning. On the other hand, in a talking mentality, the goal is for both sides, and I guess there can be more than two, but just to keep it simple, for both sides to understand each other. This is a very different goal. It involves both communicating well and listening well. If your goal is not only for the other person to understand you, but also for you to understand them, you're going to approach this interaction with them very differently than if your goal is simply to defeat them in some way. Okay, some other more specific differences between fighting and talking. In fighting, there tends to be a lot of interruptions, lots of attempts to silence the other side. In talking, one side will wait for the other to finish politely. How am I doing on time? All right, I've been talking for about 12 minutes. Okay. Now, related to this, in fighting, when you're fighting, you tend to never finish. In a fight, people seem to just go on as long as possible, often in an attempt, again, to silence others. In a talking mentality, we make our point, finish, and let the other side respond. This is sort of a social contract. In order to do this, to feel safe, making your point, stopping, letting the other person speak, you have to trust that they are going to do the same thing. That once you give them the floor, they are going to make a point, stop, and give the floor back to you. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship, and it only works if both sides do it. That's why it's so much easier to fight than to talk. Because fighting really only takes one side. If one person refuses to follow these rules, then the talk can't happen. But if one person insists on making it happen, they get to do what they want to do. They get to say their side and believe, hey, I won, I shut that guy up. They can do that alone. But having talking, it takes both people following these mutually respectful parameters. Okay, a few more differences. In fighting, we never admit when we're wrong. Often we become angry or change the subject to avoid this. Whereas in talking, we simply change our views when presented with new ideas. Admit mistakes when they happen. Going back to my example earlier, if I had said it's night right now, in this time, in this place in Florida at 12 noon, and then someone said if you look out the window and see that the sun is up, and by definition, the sun being up means it's not night, in a talking mentality, I would say, oh, I never thought of that, I guess you're right. And it's not that big a deal to do that. In a fighting mentality, I'd be like, oh, that's what I'd expect from a stupid guy like you. I'd try to deflect to avoid admitting the mistake, because when in a fighting mentality, being wrong seems really scary for some reason, which it shouldn't be. It doesn't really make any sense that one would be afraid of being wrong, because being wrong is merely an opportunity to learn. In a talking mentality, admitting mistakes is not a big deal. It often happens so quickly, people don't even notice it. And the paradox is, once you admit you made a mistake, the mistake is gone. Now you're no longer wrong anyway. So the people who are so afraid of being wrong, when they never admit that they're wrong, they end up making themselves wrong more often. They're never able to fix their mistakes. It's an interesting little paradox. And finally, in fighting, tends to be based on emotion, especially anger and hurt. And talking tends to be based on logic, at least when it's done well. And this, I'm talking about issues. This is what some people would call intellectual debate or intellectual discussion. It's not just any conversation. I'm discussing things you perhaps disagree with other people. Okay, so before we move on to section 3, a couple of things, questions to check for understanding. Is fighting the same as talking?
No.
What is the difference?
The difference is one is emotionally charged, one seeks to win, the other conversely seeks to learn, an opportunity to logically come to an understanding, and is not usually emotionally charged.
Okay, good. When talking, should you finish your point and allow the other side to respond, or should you continue talking as long as possible?
Make your point clear and hand the floor off to the other one. So.
Good. If you change your views when presented with new ideas, are you following a talking mentality or a fighting mentality?
A talking mentality.
Good. If you always try to win, are you following a talking mentality or a fighting mentality?
Fighting mentality.
Good, great. Okay, so, quick side note. Another interesting thing about the shape of conversations is when you're trying to have a discussion with someone, often you'll come up with question that will lead to answer that will lead to more discussion. One common method people use in a fighting mentality is they ask a question, you answer it, go more discussion. Then if you ask a question, they refuse to answer it, sending the conversation back. You may ask the question again, they refuse to answer it again, and then this is where people often say, we're going in circles. This is a very common thing for if you get someone to engage with you, which is better than many people do, but they don't follow these rules. They still want to win. And if it becomes clear they're not winning, one way people will try to just end the interaction is to refuse to answer your questions several times in a row, and then announce that you both are to blame collectively because we're going in circles. But this circle pattern tends to happen because the person refused to answer the question. Usually if you answer a question, then you can move on in a different direction. Okay, so we have established that in order to understand the truth, people should talk to each other with other points of view. We have talked about the difference between talking to people with other points of view and fighting with them. So now I come to the main center of the presentation, which is my tiny little primer on logic. I actually did take a class on formal logic many years ago, which is a hell of a lot more than most people get, but I won't claim to be an expert on the matter. It was just introduction to logic. But based on my understanding of logic, this is what I'm going to summarize. How am I doing on time? All right, I've been talking for 20 minutes now. Okay. So formal logic. It is possible to measure statements and determine if they are true or not, at least within a framework of other true statements. This is something that I don't want to get into too much, and it's something that people often cling to when they don't like that they've been proved wrong about something. But in any scientific logical argument, you need to start with one statement and say, if this is true, then this other thing is true. Those are called axioms. But once within that framework, using logic, it is possible to measure statements and determine if they are true or not. It is not enough just to say, this is my opinion. I feel strongly about it. I know that I am right. We can do better than that. We can actually measure things to see if they are true or not. Empirical reasoning has a long history dating back at least to the Egyptians. They were very good with geometry, for example. The Greek philosophers were always the most fun for me. Particularly Pythagoras, Socrates, and Plato were credited as really starting much of the system of logic and reasoning that we still use to this day. Of those, my favorite was always Socrates. I've read several of his works. I always liked him. Well, Socrates didn't write anything. I've read things about Socrates. Socrates, in a nutshell, the good parts. He just basically taught question everything. Socrates claimed really that he knew nothing, actually, but that because he was aware of his own ignorance, he at least knew enough to ask questions, to question everything. He knew asking questions and trying to learn was the right thing to do. And he was famous for confronting other people who believed themselves to be smart and asking them questions. And by asking questions, he pointed out all the things that they refused to think about, that they refused to ask. So even though he claimed to be coming from a place of ignorance, the simple knowledge that questions are good and we should never think that we know everything, we should never think we're done learning, was what made Socrates great, in my opinion. For the record, my least favorite philosopher is Plato. I consider him to be an entitled, self-centered jerk. Okay, so logic is very similar to math. It's basically the same thing, but we use it to measure truth. And we also you can use logic to measure what we don't know. Not whether something's true or false, but whether we simply can't say based on the available information. So, starting with basics of logic. And I know this is simple. The idea is just to show how a logical statement works so we can apply it later. So, if I say, all dogs are animals, and I say, Fluffy is a dog, it follows logically, Fluffy is an animal. Okay? We can tend to put this in the logic's favorite words, which are if and then. If all dogs are animals and Fluffy is a dog, then Fluffy is an animal. Now, if I went on and I did to say Spot is an animal, is Spot a dog?
No.
Wrong. The answer to this question is not no. The answer to this question is we don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. We know all dogs are animals. We know Spot is an animal. Spot might be a dog. Spot might be a cat. We cannot say for sure Spot is not a dog. But we cannot say for sure Spot is a dog. And this is where logic really becomes valuable, is the ability to measure a statement someone has made and say, has that been proved or not? It's often difficult to say, I can disprove what you said. But it's actually a bit of a lower bar to just say, you have not proved what you said. You're saying you know this for a fact, and it's really just an opinion. Okay, so, using logic, getting back to the nature of truth. I showed my reasons that I accept as true the idea that humans should listen to other humans. Okay? I'm taking this as true. This is my framework I'm starting with in logic. I should write it bigger. You can't really read it from there. I'm going to write that again. All right. So, humans should listen to other humans. All right. Starting with this statement. Now, next statement, we try this. Women are humans. All right? I'm going to take these two statements and apply the logic to them. If humans should listen to other humans, and women are humans, then, I'll go ahead and write it, if and then women, humans should listen to women. Do you agree this statement is logical?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, going on with these two. If we add another statement, if we say, and men are humans. If this is true, and men are humans, then we can take the men here and sub it into the humans here. And write this statement again as men should listen to women. Does that seem logical to you?
Yeah.
Okay, so now, if we have defined men as human beings, and we have defined women as human beings, then we can also reverse the order these words go in. We can take this spot for humans and write women here. Women should listen to. We can take this spot for humans and write men here. Right, men. And then this statement becomes logical. Women should listen to men. Does that seem logical to you? Yes? Is this statement offensive? Am I attacking women by claiming women should listen to men?
No.
Would it be logical for someone to become angry with me if I said that?
No.
If someone became angry, would it perhaps be because they're approaching things from a fighting mentality instead of a talking mentality?
Probably.
Right. Okay. That's basically my point. That's basically my point. Several times in my life, I have tried to say this fairly simple sentence and had people get angry at me. But I'm not attacking anyone. I believe men should listen to women. I 100% believe that. I also believe women should listen to men. I believe everyone should listen to everyone. I think that's a good thing. I think that's compassionate. So that's my presentation. Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. So that took me 30 minutes. Great. I was shooting for less than an hour and I got it in a half hour. Great. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.